Hello, everyone. You're very welcome to another of the online series brought to you by the OEM Music Centre. It is called Getting to Know. It's trying to understand the workings of creative people in music, people who write, people who compose, a little bit of an understanding about what gets their motors running. This is put together in association with Dig With It magazine. I'm the editor of that publication, and the Performing Rights Society are the people who are kind of helping with the wherewithal to put it all together. So we're going to introduce then an incredible artiste, really. He's superbly versatile, has brought some remarkable stuff to Northern Ireland, and is also internationally feted, lots and lots of different awards and kudos all around the world. He's a composer. He's a music maker. He's artistic director of the Belfast Ensemble. Let's introduce him then. This is Conor Mitchell. Conor, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Yay! Well, that's good to hear. Conor, how are you? Are you well?
I'm all right. I'm not sure I can live up to that intro, but I'll have a bash.
Good. I'm sure you will. And you've led such a fascinating artistic life that we're going to skip in and out and all around the place. And at the end of it all, we will also have to concede that we haven't covered all of your artistic bases. So you have to kind of sell those by the by and then introduce those to us. But we're going to start on an interesting riff in mid-March. The pandemic closed down cultural life and civic life and everywhere across the world, really. And the QFT, the Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast, one of the ways that they adapted was to show different performances. And one of the things that they chose to highlight then was 10 Plagues, which was written by you. And the music was written by you, and strangely prescient, obviously, but it was based on was it 1665, Daniel Defoe's kind of story, but it absolutely resonated with the time. Did that must have pierced you when you were kind of watching it or observing the news?
Yeah, well, weirdly, I had made that piece quite a long time ago for the singer Marc Almond. And when the Belfast Ensemble started, it was a piece that immediately I thought a singer called Matthew Cavan, who's a very versatile cabaret, come drag, come musical theatre, come opera singer in Belfast. I actually thought this is perfect for Matthew. So we had done a production of it in Belfast and always meant to create a film archive of it. And when the pandemic hit, I noticed that the book that's based on, Daniel Defoe's Journal of a Plague Year, I think it became #1 bestseller.
Wow.
So suddenly we just thought, look, this is crazy. This seems like a really good way to demonstrate to our public that we were still going and that we were able to react to the pandemic. And yeah, it just surmised, I think, a lot of the stuff that we were thinking, even though that piece is ostensibly about the AIDS crisis in the 80s. I was just amazed at how much of Mark Ravenhill's text and the Daniel Defoe translated into the modern context, spookily so.
Yes. Well, listen, we'll talk a little bit about it in a moment. Now, the format normally is the artist at this point picks up an acoustic guitar, tunes up, sticks a capo on or whatever, and then plays. But such is the nature of this. And we have done it live before, like Hannah Peel has been playing stuff and introducing ideas. So it's not foreign to the format. We're going to give it an absolutely full rattle tonight. So we're going to drop in bits of video, bits of YouTube audio to kind of to bring us across your career. So you've already set this one up for us. This is the 10 Plagues, and this is Belfast Ensemble production, as I understand it. And just this particular snippet from it, then, what are you going to say about it, Conor?
This is a song that happens, this song was actually written in New York. It was the first song ever written for 10 Plagues, where I was put on a plane and forced to go to New York to write something down. So it was written in about the same time as it takes to perform it, about 3.5 minutes.
Wow.
In a tiny, tiny little room. But actually, it's the most melodic and the most song form of a very dissonant score, very much in the style of Hans Eisler and Germanic cabaret song from the 1930s. It's called Farewell.
Is over, no caress or bruise shall pass between us now. But stand apart and leave you to a house shut up and carved and picked, and so I neither hit you nor kissed you. Then you left, and so goodbye.
Okay, well, there you go. I think there was possibly a few technical issues there, and we're not quite sure. These are always a bit of an adventure. You certainly got a taste of it there, and that is on YouTube if you want to revisit it. And indeed, once this entire journey is over, you can revisit it as well. It stays up for a while. So 10 Plagues, it was the Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh, originally ran 2011. And you worked. It was Mark Ravenhill, the guy who was a librettist in that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mark Ravenhill. We were kind of match made by the principal of LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Drama, and a while ago, and we had done some slight projects together. And I think my interest in Germanic music theatre worked very well with Mark's interest in Germanic Brecht-based kind of agitprop state of the nation drama. So we came together, and we, for a while, were trying to make something which was very theatre and very music-based, and a lot of themes came together. And basically, we just landed upon this idea of creating a contemporary song cycle, which at the time was a very, I mean, it's a very old-fashioned form of storytelling that a lot of people would have associated with Schubert and stuff like that. But actually, it was perfect for the form and for that singer, which was Marc Almond. So Marc Almond, in a sense, was there from the very start, and we wrote a bespoke piece for him. So that's a whole other story.
Yes.
But yeah, it took quite a while for that piece to reach fruition. And, you know, it went through so many incarnations and started at the Royal Court, and then it moved to the Traverse and Wilton's Music Hall. And yeah, Marc Almond lived with it for many, many, many years. So,
and a remarkable character. You know, he obviously has done some Jacques Brel, and he has done Piaf and Russian choirs and all. So I would imagine he must have relished it as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, Marc Almond is encyclopedic about the form of, I would say, pre-1950s, 1960s cabaret singing. The old kind of Jacques Brel chanteur kind of storytelling things behind song, which is what made him so amazing to work with. You know, he's one of the only people sanctioned by the Brel estate to perform that catalogue as well. And he really fits into that slightly androgynous Weimar sensibility that I suppose has infused my work my whole life. I mean, so a lot of worlds collided with that. Do you know what I mean? I was taught by an old German-influenced composer who had been taught by Hans Eisler, called David Blake, in East Berlin. He was an old commie. So there was a little photograph of Brecht on one side of the wall and a little photograph of Hans Eisler on the other. So everything came back to communist art song of the 1930s and 40s, which I think I'm still kind of writing.
There's not enough of that, I don't think.
No, there's not. There's not. You can hear it. You can hear that in Britney Spears. You know.
Yeah.
Minor songs with a point.
Yeah, and a song like Mac the Knife, which made its way to Vegas and everywhere, you know, and through all the back doors. So,
like the music of Sting and the Police has a strong Hans Eisler influence. I mean, Sting actually references some of the Hollywood songbook by Hans Eisler, written in the 1940s, in his own music.
Okay, well, listen, we're trying to get a handle on Conor Mitchell. Better men than I have tried, I'm sure, but I you know, I've been doing a bit of reading about you and stuff, and County Armagh originally.
Yeah, originally from Lurgan.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, whole family, both sides. Lurgan.
Okay. And this moment comes into the story, a production of Zigger Zagger, and you're 15 years old. Can you remember much about that?
Funnily enough, I was actually thinking about this but 2 days ago.
Right.
Dad had mentioned it. Yeah, the old Arts Theatre and the Ulster Youth Theatre were like really big parts of my life, because coming from Lurgan, going to youth theatre in Belfast meant getting a train on a Saturday early in the morning and then spending the whole day in Belfast and effectively forming this whole other theatre life, which eventually seizes you. So you kind of run away to the circus. But yeah, Zigger Zagger was, a play where,
And you were 15, you were precocious?
I was, well, because I wanted to, I think I always wanted to be a performer.
Yeah.
That was my first access to the arts. But the thing that I always did was I played music. So I've always struggled with the idea that music has become my career, because music was that thing that I just had always done. My brother was an astonishing musician, still is. And he's slightly older than me. So when he was practicing his saxophone, I was trying to imitate him practicing the clarinet. And then on Saturday mornings, you were put on a big yellow bus and sent to youth orchestra. So music was this thing that I just always did. And then the performance happened in my late teenage years. And then I was the world's worst professional actor for 1 year. And that all came together in telling dramatical stories through the use of music. So, you know, some people are in the concert hall and some people are on the stage, and I've just always been on the stage.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're gonna hurtle backwards and forwards as we promised, and This is 2012, the Cultural Olympiad. So you get the call and say, can you come together with something that will, I guess, represent the North in some shape or form? Or was it as specific as that? Or was it an open-ended brief?
This was actually quite a significant moment in my life, because I had literally just returned to Northern Ireland, and I had done 10 years in musical theatre in London, and there was a new company being started called Northern Ireland Opera, and this was their first ever commission, believe it or not, for the Olympics in 2012. Mark Ravenhill wrote the text for this as well, and it's a very short opera. So this was effectively the first piece of contemporary classical I had written after a hiatus of about 10, 12 years, I suspect. So I'm always very fond of it. It's very rough around the edges, but I think it demonstrates a lyricism in the male voice that I've always clung to.
And correct me if I'm wrong then, Conor, there is a soldier and there is a woman from West Belfast. Is that part of the storyline?
Yeah, it's very along the lines of the kind of Jean McConville mythology of a woman in a Catholic area of Belfast takes in a wounded soldier. And for 10 minutes, it's about the psychodrama of that. And then for the final 5 minutes, we jump 40 years ahead, where she's been basically keeping him in her house for 40 years. And it ends with them becoming skeletons. Yeah. It was ostensibly based on Mary Peters. Well, that's what we told the commissioners, but it didn't look like that.
And I something that's preoccupied me over a long time is popular music and the conflict. And there's hundreds of examples of songs.
Yeah.
But serious music, I don't know if they've grappled that much with the conflict. So that sounds like a rare moment, really.
Well, actually, this has become a kind of day-to-day battle for me, because I wrote a series of pieces, one like the biggest being a Requiem for the Disappeared.
Yeah.
And I thought there was great public will to make those pieces, and individuals, actors, musicians, and the public are very, very behind them. But where I think they're slightly paralyzed is I think funders, orchestras, and theaters are very, very reticent to get behind them, not because they don't want to do them, but because they feel that they might come across as partisan.
Yes.
Okay. And so there's a real reticence, I think, to program that kind of work, which has driven it slightly underground. Because that's a subsidized world, that's not existing in the pop sphere. So in a sense, they're freer to say whatever they want.
Yes.
Northern Ireland, I think, it's just slightly closed down the expression of contemporary classical music to larger political events in a way that somewhere like Russia hasn't.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay.
In Russia, you can write the Leningrad Symphony, but I'm not sure in Northern Ireland you could write, the Derry Symphony.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's very valid. I think that's prepped our imagination then. So time to hear a piece from One Day. That is an excerpt then from our day at Conor Mitchell's contribution then to the Culture Olympiad in 2012. We're going to skip backwards again because that's part of the fun of it all. I think you said that, or you seem to give the impression in 2012 then there was a sort of a shift, I guess, in your, obviously geographically, you came back after 10 or 12 years in London,
Yeah.
and you were producing work like that. Before that, there was musical theatre. So prior to your return to Belfast, then, can you give us a little bit of an indication about what you were doing, how you were developing as an artist?
Oh, did I freeze there for a second? Well, I had got on the Gregby train, I think, like a lot of other people, at 18, 19, and gone to the Big Island and trained over there. And was sporadically coming back over here to do little pieces of scoring and stuff like that. But one private passion that I'd always had was musical theatre. I mean, and the musical theatre that I really responded to very much was the kind of early kind of Kurt Weill, big band jazz, and the Stephen Sondheims of this world, you know, all of that stuff. So I found that I did a few gigs in London doing that with singers, and it went down really well. But within a matter of years, I was just on this huge musical theatre train, which, you know, is very seductive, and I really, really liked it. And I love the accessibility of all of that West End stuff. And I had a great deal of success going in and out of the National Theatre and the West End. But I felt that while one big window was opening up, a giant door was shutting, and that was basically the world of orchestral music. And it was, you know, it was very firmly shutting, because in the British music scene, they like to put you in one very specific box in a way that the Americans don't. And I was just becoming, and I felt this more and more, I was becoming a kind of new Sondheim kind of person. And then I found myself even imitating Steve's sound, you know, so I was writing shows or like, you know, creating huge narratives, and I kept going back into this Sondheim kind of endless recit leading to a 32-bar song. And I needed to break out of that. I'm not saying I didn't want to return to it, but I needed to find other things to do, because I just felt that I was going to be doing the same thing for the next 40 years if I didn't take action. So I came over here and I started diversifying, and a lot of people that I talked about my music think actually that I took a completely new direction, but the reality is I didn't. I actually went right back to the start and picked up where I had been at the age of 23, and then just started again in the hope that the musical theatre canon can, you know, be picked up later on. I mean, I'm working on a musical at the minute for the Lyric Theatre, yeah. So hopefully it's more mature.
And before we pass over that, then I gather, I could be wrong, that Stephen Sondheim gave you the nod, gave you the some kind of endorsement.
Yeah, I got to know Steve, but I mean, I say that, but Steve knows millions and millions and millions of people. I know,
he doesn't know me. He doesn't know many of us.
He's this incredibly generous spirit in that. I had a broadcast on Radio 3, and I think it was of some, you know, very, very early musical theatre stuff. And the Stephen Sondheim Society in London actually sent him a demo of that, and this letter just arrived through the door from Stephen Sondheim saying, if you're in New York, would you like to have dinner? And I was in New York a few months later, and we had dinner, and then I kind of got to know him. But he is this amazing, amazing person. And what's so fantastic about him is that his points of reference are, you know, as well as him, you know, he's got this 20th century point of reference that you just can't match. So he says things like Lenny used to do that. And you realize he's talking about Leonard Bernstein. Or he'll use the word Cole and you realize he's talking about Cole Porter.
Wow.
Oscar, or Dick is Richard Rodgers. He straddles the entire 20th century American contemporary music and musical theatre scene. He was taught by like Milton Babbage. I mean, he's an amazing person in his own right. And that's besides all his music. And even to have a small conversation with Sondheim about the form of musical theatre structure or the purpose of theatre itself is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
He talks about it in a way that other people can't. I mean, but he's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to talk Abomination now. And I think I was there the third or the fourth night or something like that. And by that stage, all of Northern Ireland and beyond was buzzing. And the night I went in, I was outrageously difficult to get a ticket. It all sold out 5 nights. I think it sold out. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And when I went in, I probably knew maybe 10% of the audience, and they were probably like me, people who didn't often go to the theatre, certainly didn't go to things that would be deemed opera.
Yeah.
And people were cheering and they were shouting and they were in awe. So you were party to a cultural moment. It was Outburst Arts, who kind of helped to bring it together. It was the Paul Hamlin Foundation, I think, who funded part of it. There was lots of people came together, willing it on, and basically, we'll maybe talk more about it later. But it was based around a radio conversation between Stephen Nolan, Radio Ulster, and Iris Robinson. Can you kind of bring us back to the early origins of the creation of Abomination?
We had the ensemble had done a few early works in our very, very, very early days. We were reaching out to find anyone that would talk to us. Myself and Abigail McGibbon, endlessly having cups of coffee we were buying for people. And one of the people that spoke to us very early on was Outburst Festival. And Ruth McCarthy, and we had 2 small little performances within Outburst the 2 previous years, and Ruth said she would give us a little bit of money for that second one if we could do an event at the end of Outburst. So after our final performance of the Doppler Effect, we were going to do this tiny little 15-minute cabaret, and I had always wanted to explore ugly words with beautiful music. So I wanted to take nasty, offensive stuff as I saw it from the DUP, particularly a sentence, "They are puffs," by Sammy Wilson. And I wanted to send it to a kind of comedy, operetta kind of thing. And we did this for 15 minutes at the end of Outburst the year before we did the opera. And people went up, like I'm genuinely, myself and Abby were completely taken aback. We went up 45 minutes late and we were looking out the door of the Lyric. We were just in the studio and there was a queue the whole way up Ridgeway Street. And we had basically been doing this show for 5 nights the week before, giving tickets away, phoning people endlessly saying, please come and see this show, please come and see this show. And we're doing this tiny little thing at the end. Forget about it. It's called Abomination. And that had queues around the door. So myself, Abby, and Ruth just went, right, we have got to do this on a larger scale and put grand opera inside it. And that became Abomination. Which was a total roller coaster, but amazing.
Well, let's cue up a bit of video now, and then we can talk some more about it in a moment. Then.
One moment, please.
I'm a politician. I have a right to speak.
Here's the fundamental question.
To my Christian views, and no one like you can stop me. And speak it all around the country. I can speak it all round the country. I can speak.
Can you see how people
all
who detest
round
gay
the
people
country.
may be
All
influenced
round
by
the
language from
country.
politicians?
Legalize homosexuality in Northern Ireland. The DUP adamantly believes that homosexuality and its proposed legalization is indirect defiance of and cannot be justified from any Christian or non-religious or ethical perspective.
I'm asking this question genuinely because I'm trying to understand.
It is a scandalous surrender to a tiny minority campaign.
And I say that very loudly this morning. Iris Robinson condemns the people who kicked and punched that young gay man close to death.
To be treated as a normal way of life.
What if they were kicking and punching that young gay man, not because they detested him, but because they detested what he does? What if they actually love him, but they hate what he does?
Instead of harmful deviance. Effect on the law as a restraint on bestiality, incest and rape will further be reduced, will further be giving in a cost
My goodness, I'm catching my breath. You kind of, you obviously the lyrics were coming up there. Everything was verbatim from a broadcast on Radio Ulster in the morning.
That particular extract was a letter from 1982 that
Okay.
The DUP jointly signed to stop or to voice concerns for the legalization of homosexuality in Northern Ireland.
Right.
And when I remember reading that for the first time and just being completely taken aback.
Yeah.
I thought, God, what a brilliant lyric.
Yeah. And, we're hearing about Trump's tweets kind of being, blue ticked and being taken off various platforms at the minute. And for a while in Northern Ireland, a lot of that stuff was just put out there, wasn't it? Without apology or almost backed with what they believed was the full moral weight of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think music, theatre and opera, like going back to like the works of Brecht and Weill or Brecht and Dessau and Eisler, and even I'd say Mozart with The Marriage of Figaro, music can put such a beautiful couch on things. It can add a veneer of respectability to something which can be a very profound political message. It can also take sentiments that perhaps the audience aren't quite familiar with, like in Marriage of Figaro, the fact that a servant can get one up over, a member of the aristocracy. And I think that's what we really wanted to explore in that. I think we're all very, very keen that music had a specific function in this. So I really wanted to get across to the audience that this was real. This language actually happened. And let's use these kind of melodic, beautiful tunes. And in that particular instance, very John Adams, Nixon in China, American minimalism to like get the message home. Yeah.
Very beautiful. Obviously, there was intellectual rigor there. But when you were in the theatre, it really hit you in the guts as well. It was very physical and everybody was moved by it, wasn't it? So it worked on every level.
Good. I mean, I think, opera is called opera for a reason. It's complete works of art. It's the opus, plural. So you have everything. You have scenic design, you have text, you have acting, you have music on a huge scale. And it has the power to hit you in the gut. That's why big things happen. Where opera, and I think music theatre doesn't work, is when it takes a very small idea and it tries to write it large. You need to take a very big idea, and it can just be a tiny little corner of an idea, like what Benjamin Britten does incredibly well. He just takes a tiny little event, but which has a huge, huge significance, and he explores it through music. There are countless examples, I think, of composers who have gone the reverse, like Nico Mui's operas. I don't think really hit the mark because they take very small events and try and make it doesn't work. But in the case of Abomination, one of the things I found incredibly theatrical about the entire experience was that we didn't really have to explain anything. All we had to do was stage it very nicely. Aoife McGee just booked a lovely orchestra. I staged it. Abby got lovely actors, and we let all of that stuff happen in the imaginations and in the conscience of the audience. And that's what I thought. I thought the theatre of the event was actually happening in the mind of the audience.
Yes, there was that incredible. It was brilliantly staged, brilliantly choreographed. And that moment, there's a sort of a bed scene, and there's kind of feathers fluttering and stuff, and it becomes like Leda and the Swan or something. There's this whole thing going on, and
yeah.
I just going, this is just the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I've seen great things in lots of different spheres, but that was just a unique. Maybe I should go to opera more often, but it just absolutely blew my mind. So,
well, good. I'm glad you felt that. But one of the things about the Belfast Ensemble is that it's an attempt at ensemble practice. So we have been going for like 3 years when we made that. And actually, when we made Abomination, I think we were 2.5 years into making work. The idea was that the same bunch of creatives were getting together quite regularly. So we had a real shorthand, which is what an ensemble is. So we didn't have to go back to square one. We didn't have a designer there from the start saying, this is what you need to do. We all kind of knew each other's language, and they kind of trusted me to run with what I wanted to do. And Outburst were very on board. So it just became a very collaborative, very easy. It's one of the easiest pieces I think I've ever been involved in making.
Wow. Okay, well, Conor Mitchell, if you just joined, this is a conversation as part of a series called Getting to Know, which is trying to understand the creative process that goes into writing and composing music. We're going to look at something slightly different now. This is called Kinder music, and this is something that was articulated. This came out this year, I think.
Yeah, it did. There's always been a strand to my work, which is making work for young audiences. And this was made by the ensemble this year for the Belfast Children's Festival. And it's an attempt to show children how instruments work. And this, it's for a narrator and very tiny orchestra, all written in a very Prokofiev kind of sound world. And I think this is the moment where the flute tries to escape from the other instruments and flies all around the room. There's an amazing flautist called Ashlyn Agony who plays this.
It's a bit Peter and the Wolf. There's
very Peter and the Wolf. All of the music is very referential to famous children's things that we've heard before. So it uses children's tunes, nursery rhymes, and in this moment, it clearly references Prokofiev's sound world.
Brilliant. Okay, we got to hear it. An extract from Kinder Music. Somebody stop that flute. That way.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
I read that.
And I think you got an idea too of the children enjoying the seeming anarchy of that as well. That it was, again, you didn't feel stifled by the academy or by seriousness or whatever. You were kind of inviting the human spirit really to partake of that.
I mean, I can't stress how important enough I think children being in amongst live musical performance is, being able to touch instruments and hear it. And I don't subscribe to the theory that children just need a very basic, tiny little instrument. I think they need to be shown total sophistication, show them total virtuosity. Like Ashlyn playing that flute, or Aoife McGee on her viola, like doing, D flat major scales. I think that's really what impresses children. It's what is possible on this piece of wood or this piece of metal. And it's really important, I think, that the ensemble, that was kind of in one of our founding agreements, was that for every piece of adult work that we make, we must have the same people making something for children.
You're not getting the kind of the cheap version or the bargain basement ensemble. Then you're getting the first raters, which is pretty good. So you froze momentarily there, but I'm glad you're back.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say we got I think we got confirmation today on a children's opera, so we're trying to program that at the minute. And that will be part of the ensemble catalogue for next year, COVID permitting.
Okay. Yeah, you sound like you're winning, Conor. Does it feel like you're winning?
I think. I mean, I'm very impatient. I feel like I'm 10 years behind where I should be, and I have this sneaking suspicion when I'm 65, I might have figured it all out, and then it might be slightly too late to knock on the door and tell them I'm some up and coming composer. But I think lots of people are in that situation. But I think one of my frustrations with my career and music making has been that I kind of want to do it all.
Yeah.
I really admire people like Stephen Sondheim and I think a lot of rock and pop musicians. I really admire that they can put their focus exclusively into, let's say, the 3-minute song or the 32-bar song, or somebody that just wants to write film music. I've always been wildly envious of people do that, but I work in one form and then I kind of get bored for 12 months and then I move on to something else, and I think that really improves my practice, but I'm not sure I think it makes it hard for people to figure out what it is that I do.
Yes. Okay. And we had a conversation, I think, earlier today about some upcoming projects. I don't know what you can share and what you can't share with us, but you have Mischief around the corner.
Yeah. There's 2 big projects up and coming. One is we're in talks with Outburst again and with the Ulster Orchestra about making an event in November that I think should be of scale and for the city. But we're just, we're at the mercy of this virus. So if that event comes off, I think it'd be incredibly significant in Belfast's history for those or 3 organizations to come together and to cross-pollinate those audiences. I'm with the Arts Council and City Council and Paul Hamlin. I think it could be massively brilliant. The other one is that the ensemble are probably release this because I think we've got a green light, but we're making a new piece called The Trial of Harvey Weinstein.
Okay, right.
So that's becoming kind of the burning focus at the minute. And I think it's treading on the same kind of territory as Abomination, but with potentially a more global scope in terms of the storyline. And it's something that I'm passionate. That was an idea that I had before we even did Abomination. So I'm talking to South Bank Centre and a few other partners, and we're trying to get that off the ground, but that will be a slow burn. And there was an idea to open that at the end of this year, but I think with the pandemic, it'll have a slightly longer gestation, but that's going to be for 7 sopranos, and we'll see. But yeah, that could be difficult. I think there'll be a lot of lawyers involved.
Well, I was going to say, you know, if Abomination was a challenge, then Harvey Weinstein's you're taking on various bits of cultural kind of gatekeepers and all the rest of it. So
there's a slight difficulty in that I think, you know, if you create something which is didactic, whether a piece of music or a play, you create yourself as a moral arbiter of truth. You know, so you're like, if we do Abomination, what we're effectively saying to the audience is, you know, we are above this. We are saying that this is wrong, you know, quite rightly. But in the Harvey Weinstein case, I am acutely aware of the fact that I am not a woman. So it could feel slightly disingenuous that I'm the lead creative on that. So I just need to be very careful about how that piece is created and the voices that go into the creation of it, without sabotaging, you know, the ethic at the heart of the piece. So I want to go in a way slower than we did with Abomination.
Okay. We're going to have one more clip, and this is Lunaria. And I think there was a version of this at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and there was also a Belfast version at the Mac, I think. So give us a few thoughts, and we'll cue it up then.
We did this, we actually did this at the Lyric, first of all, for 2 nights, and then the Queen Elizabeth Hall. This was written for PRS, for their New Music Biennial last year. And it's a 12-minute, 15-minute piece of music that was specifically for the ensemble to celebrate them being together for 2 years. But it became a kind of threnody on the previous 2 years of political activity in Northern Ireland. So you'll hear all these voices reading news statements. I think this is a short extract from the start. It's in the American minimalistic style.
That was a little selection or a little section from Lunaria. And you talked about the American minimalist style. I wouldn't pretend to know a lot about this, but there's people like Steve Reich, who that kind of repetition and those little kind of small modulations and stuff. Is it would he have been part of that idea?
Yeah. I mean, I have always been like I listen to. Like I don't enjoy listening to music. I find it quite hard to do. I mean, I listen to Radio 4 because the less music that's in my life, the better. That means I don't have to work. But I listen to a piece of music a day, or at least two that I find instructive. You know. Oh, did I freeze there?
Very briefly.
And my network is constantly trying to find the extender on the other side of the flat. I think that's happening across the road. And I've recently, you know, I try to put all of these kind of pieces in a catalog in my brain, and the ones that have always stuck out are the ones that differentiate from my own work, and then the ones that I find intellectually very similar. They don't have to sound the same, but I always find when I was listening to pieces on daily practice that pieces of Stravinsky or pieces of pop music dealt in very, very small forms. So they were constantly changing. So a piece of Stravinsky, like, let's say, like the symphony in 3 movements, it changes form every 12 bars. So you might have a giant brass section, and then you have a little piano section. And then it's like he gets bored. In the same way that Gershwin in Rhapsody in Blue gets bored. I mean, you can tell in Rhapsody in Blue when Gershwin wakes up the next morning and starts the next page. It's just a completely different piece of music. And a lot of Beatles music does that, and a lot of Motown. But there's another kind of music and another kind of composer where you think in a much longer term. And that's more me. I think in terms of an hour, because I think I'm a theater person. And I've always noticed that American minimalism, or the music of Wagner, is more appealing to me personally because it deals in these incredibly long forms. So for the last 3 years, I've been very obsessed with how a C minor chord can be stretched over, let's say, 15 minutes and modulated. And it's a brilliant way to play with music, but you can hear that in something as simple as Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I mean, he is effectively stretching one rhythm for 4.5 minutes.
People like Miles Davis would have done that as well. And so
there is a specific mood that is elongated for a very, very long period of time. But, you know, the Chemical Brothers do that. But if you look at other composers who I do find incredibly fascinating, like Thomas Adès, who I'm a huge fan of, or Oliver Newson, they literally change every 20 bars. You know, the music of Brian Irvine from Northern Ireland is incredibly like that. It changes, it goes from one idea to the next. And while I'm probably like that in my personal life, like I'm actually quite a fast person and I change direction constantly, my music is completely the reverse. It's my ideal scenario is 3 hours of the same idea over and over again. Because that way you can really investigate a theme or an idea or a piece of theatrics. So you're making the most out of the littlest bit of material. So you can really investigate something.
Conor Mitchell, you're talking about an hour. We've been talking for an hour and playing some excerpts from your work. It's been a great pleasure. It's been very educational. We didn't even get to talk about Victorian Music Hall and Gilbert and Sullivan and all of other stuff that you're curious and reflective about. But we'll have to park that for another day. And I know you're busy anyway. But it remains for me then to thank the OEM Music Centre for putting this together. To thank PRS Foundation for the series that is Getting to Know. You can listen to the previous ones, which is Reva and Mark McCambridge from Arborist. They're still up online. At this point, we normally announce who we're going to have next week, and sadly, we were about to make a big announcement, and it's not happening now. It may happen another week. So please follow the usual channels to find out what's happening next. And I await with relish, Conor Mitchell, to see what you're up to next, because you've already telegraphed some ideas, but I just think you're in a magnificent creative period at the minute. So thank you very much.
Thank you very well. Thanks for the interview. That was great.
Lovely. See you all next week then, Tuesday at 8 o'clock for the next version of Getting to Know. Thank you.